We have a list of movies that we are dynamically fetching from a server and mapping to a local schema that matches the schema from the remote schema, and we are using it to render a list plus all the images. We want to also render a details view of each one of these movies as we go and perhaps select one of these movies. Yes? Notice that at no point have we ever accessed yet our own database. Yes? None of this data lives in our database. It lives in somebody else's database. Right? We would only store in our database anything that we would need to actually remember. Right? For instance, if I particularly like any one of these movies, right, the only place where I could possibly store that is in my own local database. Right? I would need to have a representation of who likes this movie, and also a representation of what do they like. What particular movie do they like. Notice that none of this information lives on my server just yet. To have a representation of me, perhaps they might force me to register or log in, and presumably there will be a record that represents me. Right? Also, if there's a movie that I particularly like, and I maybe click on star or a heart or whatever, right? I would need to record that. And now, to do that, I would need to create some relationship between me represented as a record and some movie also represented as a record. Now it might be that this movie nobody has liked it yet in my application, in our application. So that movie is nowhere represented in my database. Yes? I would need to go see if such a movie exists. If it doesn't exist, I will need to insert that movie. Yes? And then I'll need to create another record that says that so-and-so likes so-and-so movie. Some relationship, maybe a likes table that says this user likes that movie. Make sense? Now, if somebody else logs in and they like the exact same movie, yes, so you'll need to do the same thing. You'll need to find whether that movie exists. If it doesn't exist, you'll need to insert it. If it does exist already, there's no point in inserting it again. Yes? You'll leave the same record. You'll instead read what the ID of that movie is. Right? And you'll only make a record insertion in the likes table, saying that so-and-so also likes that movie. Right? If later on I say that I don't like that movie again, I don't like it anymore, I will need to not necessarily remove the movie, but I'll need to remove the relationship saying that I used to like that movie. Make sense? So depending on what the life cycle is of me, the movie, and the like, right, you'll be doing different things. Right? You'll be inserting either the user, inserting the movie, inserting a like, removing a like. Normally you won't be removing a movie even if nobody likes that movie. Right? Maybe if nobody, if everybody has said, well, we liked it at some point, but now nobody likes it anymore. I leave it up to you whether you either leave the movie in there in your database or remove it because nobody likes it anymore. I don't know. Whatever you decide. Okay? But makes sense? What gets stored and where? The other point of storing in the database, what do you store in the database? Well, it looks like the database that we're going out to, when we retrieve the details, it has lots of information here. It has plot, it has the writers, the actors, the language, the country, the awards, the ratings. When I insert my movie in my database, what should I insert? Right? One of the things that you might be tempted to do is to replicate identical schema that the remote server has, right? The server remotely has a title, a year, rated, all the directors, the writers, and whatnot, all this, yes? So you might be tempted to replicate that information in your own database, okay? I'm suggesting that you don't do that, right? That you should store in your database the minimum information you need, right? Depending on what the use cases are, right? A typical use case might be that I go to my profile page and I want to be able to see, perhaps, it's a very common use case, might be all the movies that I've liked. Yes? or movies that I have written a review about. So what that list might look like typically is maybe a thumbnail, maybe the title of the movie, maybe the rating, maybe the year. Yes? Okay? So that's one use case. The other use case is that I click on that movie and I want to see the details of that movie again. I don't remember who the director was, or who the actors were, or what the plot was. I want to see it again. So a typical use case might be that I navigate to the details page of that particular movie. So the question is, where do I get those details? Right? So if I had stored in my local database, that's a good place where I could get it from, right? If I had stored in my database. I'm suggesting that there's really no need to store all that information, right? Because all that information is redundant already in the remote database. Yes? The only real thing information that you really truly need is the unique identifier. Right? That's really the only thing you ever need in your local database, because everything else could be regenerated on the fly by fetching it with the IMDb. Now, that's for the details page. For the details page, it makes sense that I just need the ID. And with the ID, I can fetch everything else, right? And that's a very low frequency operation, right? It will be very, very infrequent that I go back to see this movie over and over again. But it'll be very frequent that I go to my profile page and I see a list of movies over and over again. Yes? If I only have the IMDb stored in my database, it'd be very expensive to render that list. Yes? Because if I only have the IMDb, if I liked 10 movies, I only have the IMDb. I don't have the title, I don't have the thumbnail, I don't have anything else. I would need to make 10 calls to the remote database to fetch this information. It'd be very, very expensive. Yes? To make 10 calls. Ideally, I'd like to be able to go to my database, have that minimal information cached in my database, and with one query return 10 movies or 20 or 30 movies that I liked, okay, as one single array, instead of making many small queries per movie. Does that make sense? Right? So I would try and cache those 10 or 20 movies as minimum information that I need, the thumbnail, the IMDb, and the title maybe, that's it. Okay? For my list of movies that I like. That makes sense? Right, but for the details, right, I only really need the IMDb. All right, so let's take a look at that. Let's look at the details page. So what would that look like? The movie details. All right, so on each one of the movies, as they render, as we iterate over all the movies, what we're going to do is that we're going to declare a click event on every single movie, right, as we render it, so that if you click on any one of them, we'll know which one we should go fetch. Yes? Let's copy that, and we go back, and here's where we render them. I'm going to say, I'm going to click. If we click on that particular movie, I'm going to pass the IMDb ID of that particular movie that you just clicked. Yes? So that on the component, I can now handle that details event with the IMDb ID that came through. And I can use that in my function declared in my service to fetch that one movie using the IMDb. I'll pass in the IMDb as an argument. And it's going to come back as a promise with an actual movie object. It's going to look like this. Right? It's going to look like that. No, not like that. That's the search results. Like that. That's a movie. That's an actual object. All right, so it's going to say a movie object, movie. And I'm going to store it in a local movie object, which I don't have yet. Let's declare it right here. I'm not going to have, I'm going to declare it as just as an object. I'm going to initialize as an empty object. If I want to map it to an actual movie, I'm going to have to declare all the attributes. And I'm lazy, I'm not going to do that, but you typically would do that, right? You would declare this as a movie. I'm sorry, declare as a movie and declare it as an empty object. Okay, but I'm lazy, I'm just going to declare it and make it equal to just empty object. All right, now that we have that on the HTML, we can render. As I click through each one of these, I can, down below, look at the actual movie and the title of the movie that we fetched. Let's see if that works. Maybe we'll declare this in H2 of the movie that was fetched from the remote server. Let's see. Let's fetch Star Trek. So if I click here, down below, notice the title changes as I click each one of them, and they're all coming from the remote server. See that? Notice here. It's this one. Let's see. API key, there it is. Fetching Star Trek 3, Next Generation. Right, notice the Star Trek Next Generation. Here's the object. I'm rendering only the title, but I have everything else. I have actors, ratings, director, genre, plot. I have everything. Yes? Let's render that. Let's make it look pretty. All right, so what we're going to do is to make this look pretty, I'm going to split this into two side-by-side screens. Right? I'm going to put on the left-hand side the search. So I'm going to put on div here. Put this on the left-hand side. And, oh, no, sorry. So one big row. And it's going to have two columns, the left column and the right column. The left column will be for searching and the results, and the right-hand side will be for the details of the movie that we retrieve. So on the left-hand side, we're going to have a column. It's going to take up half the screen. The screen typically in Bootstrap is split up into 12 equal parts. So 6 columns and 6 columns, so equal parts. That's comes from the printing industry. That they break up articles also, long form newspapers and whatnot. They break it up into 12 equal parts. All right, excellent. So we broke it up. And so if we type in here aliens, notice that it's on the left-hand side. And if I click on any one of these, notice that it shows on the right-hand side. Make sense? Everybody good? Okay. So and we can certainly display more things. We can display maybe the plot. Movie.plot, maybe in a paragraph. We can render a poster, image source, and this might be movie.poster. So let's try that again. So this is maybe aliens. There we go. So poster and the plot down below. Ancient aliens. Ooh. Okay, and it's taken a shape. Make sense? All right. Let's take a short break, and we'll come back right after this.